Well, good morning again, guys, as we come into our third bedhead Bible studies, which you can see is bedhead's really bad today. I end up doing the hat thing. But we are in John 1, and we're going to start with verse 35 and go through 42. So I'm just going to read that and then just kind of babble off of it a little bit. It says, the next day, John, which we just were studying John the Baptist, so that's who we're talking about here. The next day, John the Baptist was there again with two of his disciples, or two people that he was teaching and leading, and with these two disciples, he was standing there and he saw Jesus passing by, and he said, "Look, the Lamb of God," with an exclamation point. He was excited. That's awesome. And then when the two disciples heard him say this, they started following Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw that they were following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. It was about 4 in the afternoon. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah, that is the Christ." And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas." I never pronounced that correctly. Which, when translated, is Peter. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to kind of ramble about this a little bit. Because what really stood out to me when I was reading this a few minutes before I hit record was the fact that these two guys, these two disciples who were God followers, took and were being discipled by John. That he had been living with them, doing life with them, teaching them, putting his life into theirs, giving his passion to them and pointing them to Jesus the entire time. And then when they saw Jesus coming through, and there was kind of this new thing that they felt compelled to follow Jesus in a new direction. And I wondered a little bit about how John would have felt in that situation. And I'm sure there was emotions there. I'm again a church leader for whatever that's worth, and I know other church leaders, and we get really attached to the people that are coming to our churches, our communities, and we're pouring our lives into others as they pour their lives back into us, and it gets to be a pretty emotional bond there. And when somebody leaves, it hurts. And so I have to think that John would have been hurt too. But we also know enough about John's character that I think he was probably excited at the same time that God was doing something new in their lives, and that they were taking that faith step to explore that and to follow that. So for me, in the position that I'm in life, I think I just kind of wonder how as church leaders we should let people go when God's doing something new with them. Even though it hurts me personally, sometimes it's felt like you're in a breakup of a relationship, even if it's godly and all the right reasons. But again, we need to learn how to be excited and let go, and to encourage where God's taking people to new places. I know sometimes I hear the opposite of that. I've heard over the years pastors taking and saying things, even from the quote unquote pulpit, things like, if you don't agree with what's going on here, don't let the door hit you in the butt. That's not loving. It's not John. It's not what we should be doing, or the expressions that we have. It kind of hint a little bit deeper going on there, as far as maybe jealousy, or looking at people's possessions, or maybe even sometimes wanting to build the church more than building the kingdom. It's a dangerous attitude to have. I mean, I understand that if you're in a church that you just fundamentally just don't agree with the vision and where it's heading, maybe God is moving someplace else. But that's something that you have to take pretty seriously, and pray through, and communicate through with the church leadership as well as other people in the church, to make sure that you do it well. But I think as church leaders we have to kind of watch our heart a little bit, make sure it's a little bit more like John. So when God's doing something new with somebody, that we encourage that and support that. I've heard of another situation where a pastor was a little possessive, and was telling the people, if you leave, us pastors talking, we know where you go, and you really shouldn't be leaving, because you're just taking your problems with you. And again, maybe to an extent, if somebody's wanting to leave because they're being immature, or goofy or not wanting to communicate or not wanting to pray through things or go through some tough times together, yeah, that's something we have to deal with and be discipled with. But if we're just saying those type of things because we want to keep people, when God might be doing something new with them, that can get a little concerning. So there's a balance there. There's a balance. We have to make sure if people are going from one place to another, they're following Christ, and they're doing it in Christ-like manners. But I think sometimes, in some circumstances, again, as church leaders, we can learn a little bit from John here, who pointed them to the new direction, and I believe was maybe had to deal with his own emotions on it, but still was just excited as could be that these guys were following Jesus and going to be doing more for the kingdom with this new thing that he was doing here. But at the same standpoint, I read it from a different direction too. It's not. I don't think it's just a church leadership scripture. I think it's for anyone that's within Christ. Again, I think people sometimes are too quick to move from one church to another. Again, maybe just because they don't want to deal with some hardship or some challenge, or they don't like this change or that change. One of my friends at one of the nursing homes here in town, I do some nursing home ministry, and as soon as I met him, and he knew I was a pastor, his very first thing to tell me was about this church that he had been raised in and loved and did all these things with, and until that pastor. No, this pastor's a bad guys, man. That pastor came in and he took the pulpit off the stage so that they had more room to do other things with it. And he was upset because 30 years ago they really spent a lot of money on that pulpit, and so he stopped going to the church. That's not what I'm advocating at all. I don't think that's focused on the right things. So we can leave churches or leave ministries for all the wrong reasons. And sometimes we need a little bit more maturity. But at the same standpoint, there are times that God does call us someplace else. Maybe to do a new thing or to be plugged into a new place. I talk to people all the time that just don't feel like they're spiritually fed, and they're going through tough situations, and life is kind of making them thirsty, and they're sometimes drowning in that thirst, if that makes sense. And they feel God's calling them to someplace else or to do something else, and they just they don't want to make the move. Maybe they grew up in that church, or their family goes to that church, and they're throwing some guilt at them anytime they're talking about doing something else. Or I have one friend that has been feeling like God's moving her to another church, and every time she misses a week, she gets multiple phone calls of people trying to plug her back in, and it's a blessing she has those people that love her, and hopefully that's their motive for calling back in. But at the same standpoint, if God's calling you to go from John to Jesus, if he's calling you to a new direction, you got to take that serious. He's got a purpose there, and even if that means it leaves a void in that church, maybe because you're a children's volunteer and you're worried, who's going to take care of the kids. Well, if it's truly God leading you, God will take care of those kids. And a lot of pastors get uncomfortable when I talk like this. But I think we only get uncomfortable when I talk like this as if we're not being John-like. That we need to encourage our people to get plugged into community, to be loved and have that community. But if God's leading them someplace else, and it's truly God and not just disgruntled feelings or whatnot, then we need to be able to encourage and give the okay that even though it's going to hurt, that you're not going to be around because we love you dearly. If God's leading you, you got to go. And how can we help you in that? And how can we support you in that? It's got to be part of the process. About a year ago, some friends of ours, I think they'll be okay with me saying their names, Josh and Amy Cramp. They were pretty much there at the beginning when we planted our church, and were with us for about 8 years. They were instrumental in the leadership of the church, instrumental in my wife's and my life and my kids' lives as far as our friends. I love them dearly, and God called them to Columbus, and it was a bummer. It was not good, but I know Josh and Amy that they seek the Lord and they seek Him dearly. And this was what God was calling them for their family. And so we had to bless that, pray over them, lay hands on them, and then just settle to seeing them every 3 months or so, just getting together as friends. It's not the same, and it's gut-wrenching sometimes, but you know what? I'm thrilled to death that God's leading them and that they're following, And sometimes we need a little bit more of that in the church as leaders, but also as followers of Christ, going and following wherever He leads us to be. So that's my thoughts. I got another 10 minutes. That's past my goal, so I got to shut up now. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, people.